imagine it. I can imagine it. And if I can imagine it, that means that it's not a contradiction for me to not have the cause and effect relationship that I expected. What makes me think that cause and effect works? It's because I've seen it happen before, multiple times. Well, I trust my memory that things will happen the way they happened before. Trouble is, have you ever remembered something and then it didn't actually work out the way you remembered it? At least occasionally, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remembered putting my watch here. Where the heck is it? Oh, it's in my pocket. Memory fools us. You can't trust it. And since I believe in cause and effect relationships because of my memory, that's not proof. You can trust it, but it's not proof, right? So you can't prove anything as cause and effect. In fact, when you talk about proofs for the existence of God and you say, the cosmological argument, this is Aristotle, there's stuff moving, and that stuff moved because something moved it, and that thing moved because something moved it, and so on and so forth. But we can't imagine it going back an infinite past, because then time is actually going in the other direction, and as we started talking, time has to go in this direction. And so there has to be a beginning, and that is that beginning God. We don't have any other word for it, just God. Or the Big Bang. Okay, what started the Big Bang? Just keep pushing it back, because at some point we have to say there had to be something that started everything. Call it whatever you like. Okay. How do we know? Hume says, how do you know? How do you know there had to be a start? Aristotle, help, a little help here? He's dead, can't help. Stephen Hawking, he's dead, can't help. We presume, but guess what? That's not proof. This is not proof. So David Hume, skeptic par excellence, all kinds of interesting stuff. One of my favorites. Everybody loved him. The Bonnie David, the French called him. So that gives us Kant, who had to answer David Hume. Because thanks to David Hume, they never actually met, by the way, even though there's an overlap. By the time Kant was reading David Hume, I believe David Hume had already died. But Kant was a rationalist, follower of really Leibniz at the time, through Wolff, Christian Wolff, but still it's Leibniz's philosophy. In any case, he was sleeping in a way until he read David Hume, and it woke him from his rationalist slumber. It's a very famous line. I'm sure you've all heard it. And basically this leads him to totally, up to this point he taught logic, he taught astronomy, he taught all kinds of things at the College of Königsberg, which today is actually the little town that the Russians have, that they have to take the train or road through to get to, because it's surrounded, by it's the little town there. It's not a little town; it's a big city. But in any case, that's where he was from. But in any case, he's woken from his rationalist slumbers, and has to answer the question. He has to answer David Hume. Does Kant really answer David Hume? And the problem is, David Hume gives us a situation where, thanks to the square of opposition, which is still, of course, remember the article that Quine wrote is 1952, right? So the square of opposition still gives us the sense that we know things. We call these A statements and E statements. They're definitions. So all S is P, no S is P. We know that. But we also have experiences, the first magic marker here on this is red, and then there's green, and then there's blue. The definition of magic markers would not have helped me to know that. This is particular information. So some magic marker is red, some magic marker is green, some magic marker is blue, and that's synthetic, not analytic. I couldn't have figured that out from analyticity, as Quine calls it. It's synthetic. I had to see it at the moment to know the arrangement, the actual arrangement, right? So we've got that situation where you have analytic information and you have synthetic information. And you can have knowledge of something a priori, which is before you have the experience. So you all know what horses look like. So if you're driving down the highway there and you see a horse, oh, I know that's a horse, because you have a priori knowledge of what horses look like. But to know that that was a particular horse that is a gelding, just like this information here about the magic markers, has to be experienced at that moment, right? So having experienced it, that is now a posteriori information. So you can have information ahead of time because it's in your not quite tabula rasa, but you also are learning constantly from the interaction, right? Remember, Quine is going to tell us that you really don't have two different kinds of information. It's constantly being updated. Your computer's constantly being updated. But for Kant, yes, we know this information a priori. We also learn other information a posteriori. The question that David Hume gives us, though, is there's no grounds for thinking that there's an a priori. Because I can't trust on my memory, right? Well, but that's where everything I know a priori comes from, right? So Kant has to figure out how to answer this. Otherwise, basically, metaphysics is a goner. There's no point in having metaphysics. So what does he say? He says, yes, as human beings, all of us share a common rationality that gives us a certain set of a priori. So Kant's, it's probably in this page, but let me just go. Spell that right. Let me see. Let's just do. Oh, well, okay. Here they are, actually. So we have categories, and they just happen to be almost exactly the same as Aristotle's. But Kant, being German, makes them 12 instead of 10. That's a cultural thing, I guess. 12. This is besser als 10. 12 is better than 10. So you get quantity, quality, relation, and modality. And all of these exist the same for us as rational people because our minds, being human, perceive these things the same way. psychology, right? You can't have any experience unless it happens in time. Even an abstract, I'm just sitting here thinking time is proceeding. I perceive time as, yeah, you might perceive time slower or faster depending on the mood you're in, or, et cetera, but time is there. You can't experience anything unless there's time. All humans are in that situation, right? You can't experience anything with dimensions unless it's in space. But notice the space is still there, even though I no longer have a thing there.
Right.
And that's because this isn't creating the space. I'm creating the space that I'm seeing things in. It's my perspective, right? But it's human psychology that gives me space where I perceive things, right? And so on. And everything also has certain kinds of relationships, like quantity. How many of them are there? I can perceive this as one thing. And yet it has a whole bunch of parts. Take it apart, put it back together, etc. Right? The ancient Greeks called this an antinomy because they could not solve the problem. How could it be one and many? It blew up their brains. It was, you see the guy walking along, not in a toga, but because that's Roman, right? But they're walking along, and all of a sudden their head went. I see YouTube videos of it, because their brain just blew up. Oh, I'm kidding, and everybody knows that. But they couldn't solve that problem. Problem gone. That's not a characteristic of the thing that it's both one and many parts, which is a contradiction. Everything I experience as a human looking through my human way of viewing things is a unity and parts. It's not the thing that's one and many. It's my perception of the thing that makes everything one and many. Problem gone. Absolutely marvelous. Thank you, Kant. This is terrific stuff.
It just seems like such common sense to me. I don't know why.
The whole
it's so
cup?
hard.
There's many of them. It's common sense to us today.
Right.
Thank
It's
you.
retrospective. It feels
This
like
is when this happened, though, right? Remember, these are like computer updates.
Right.
To the human computer.
Right.
Right? And we know historically exactly when this Windows 6.11,
Yeah. No, it's fair update.
gave us our update, and by the way, it hasn't impacted everyone yet. Only people that become familiar with it through culture, education, reading Kant might help, but you grow up in a school environment where our language
You need the building.
reflects this, so it's embedded in our cultural perspective. Now the problem is, Kant says we still can't actually see the thing in itself, which by the way in German is das Ding an sich. Das Ding an sich. So if I ask, this will be fun, I've not done this. What is the thing in itself? Which is das Ding an sich. Let's see what ChatGPT. Ding an sich is a concept. I didn't say Ding an sich. It came up with that on its own. Did you notice? Is a concept primarily associated with the philosophy of Immanuel Kant. It refers to objects as they exist independently of human perception or experience. Kant argued that while we can experience and perceive phenomena, which is the appearance of things, and leads to a philosophical point of view called phenomenology, the study of phenomena, right? We cannot know the thing in itself or the true essence of an object beyond our sensory experience. According to Kant, our understanding is always mediated by our senses. You see where this has traveled, right? And cognitive faculties. So what we perceive are merely representations of objects, not their true intrinsic nature. The thing in itself is